Guys, hip-hop needs new media representation. The last year in hip-hop has quite possibly been the biggest year the genre has ever seen, and is definitely the biggest year a single artist has ever had in the genre. The fact that last year was absolutely stacked in terms of releases aside, the proverbial hurricane that was the Kendrick and Drake beef left the culture shaken but ultimately reinvigorated. The beef at this point was undoubtedly the genre's biggest. It wasn't only a battle of personal wills for the sport of rap, it also seemed to represent a battle of ideologies in the zeitgeist of not only this era of hip-hop, but of the culture as a whole across its history. After a lackluster few years before Kendrick decided to drop another goddamn nuke on the game in March 2024, many people were wondering if the genre was dying or even dead already. With a severe lack of hype releases, lots of gimmicky artists, a disturbing pattern of people putting forth no effort, and a major focus of much of the music turning hard into the worst qualities of the genre by not just artists but commentators and so-called journalists alike, hip-hop seemed like it was nosediving from the fucking ozone layer with how passionless the whole thing seemed to be. Then repeating in some way what he had already did with Control back in 2013, in March 2024, Kendrick dropped a heater verse on Future and Metro Boomin's track Like That. The rest was quite literal history. We got what was coined this hip-hop civil war, a wild back and forth battle between the genre's titans that was a decade plus in the making. Since then, Kendrick has unanimously won in the eyes of the culture, save for a few people who will forever remain in denial. Drake, while still undoubtedly huge as an artist, seems to have actually been knocked off his pedestal as industry darling and biggest artist in hip-hop. If that is permanent remains to be seen, but quite a few of his fans didn't think his dry streak up until Some Sexy Songs for You would even last that long. So he for sure took quite a blow, the likes of which we really have never seen for an artist of his size or general caliber. Now, it seems like we're at a bit of an impasse in the culture, a fork in the road. While I am what a lot of people call a quote-unquote guest in the culture, I've been listening to hip-hop for 20 plus years. It is my favorite genre, not even a contest. I consider it the ultimate form of musical expression, and one of the highest forms of expression period, and my passion for the genre and culture is not rivaled by much else in my life. Over the past decade or so, I've seen the rise of what I can only describe as a fucking sickness in the genre, especially in terms of media and representation. I'm not a prude guy. I'm a poly drug addict in recovery. I used to be homeless. I used to do highly unethical things for cash and dope. Pretty much every crime under the sun that isn't murder, SA, and economic crimes I've committed. So when I say I really don't give much of a fuck about shit that is crass, dark, or inappropriate, then you can definitely take my word for it. What I've seen rise up in the representation of the genre, though, is starting to go beyond all that. I detest it personally, and many times morally. The fork in the road is this. We take this time in the culture where thought-provoking and quintessential qualities of hip-hop are on the rise in terms of music and start uplifting commentators, journalists, and reps of that same passion for the genre and similar quality to the music rising up itself. Or we continue on the path that we've been on for a decade plus now and let people who are biased, passionless, moralist, corny, IQ-deprived culture vulture fucks continue to have the platforms they've had to steer the culture into the ground for good. I'm going to talk about 3 people in particular in this video, all of them connected in a few different ways, but all of them detrimental to hip-hop as a whole. Some more detrimental than others. I'm going to go from bad to worse as I see it, and probably become more heated and harsher along the way. But these 3 lame bitches are Mal from the new Rory and Mal podcast, Aiden Ross the kick streamer, and DJ Akademiks the alcoholic sexual deviant. Mal from the Rory and Mal podcast is definitely the most tame and least problematic of the bunch, and my problem with him is much more of a personal taste thing than a moral issue, necessarily. But I just can't stand this annoying ass dude. Mal is a Drake fan, just like the other 2, but my issue with him is not that he's a Drake fan at all. To be clear, I've talked to many Drake fans. I myself am a big fan of Nothing Was the Same, and if you're reading this, it's too late. What irks the living Hades out of me about Mal is that he is a biased, unintelligent, emotionally challenged bully. Specifically when he's talking about anything to do with Kendrick Lamar, especially when it comes to Drake and Kendrick Lamar. This pettiness and lack of neutrality extends to adjacent topics like J. Cole and other California or TDE affiliated rappers as well. Ever since Drake lost to K-Dot in the beef, Mal has acted like Kendrick personally came to his fucking house, ate his ice cream, and shot his dog. Apparently he is actively friends with Drake. So he says they talk a lot, but I'm really not sure how accurate that is or how often they actually communicate. So I can understand the general sentiment. The problem here is 3 things. First, he's a fucking hip-hop podcaster / commentator with quite a huge platform. He should be able to set aside his personal feelings to some extent to look at things through an unbiased lens. Second, he can't handle conversations about these topics without getting extremely emotionally charged, ranging from shouting to damn near crying when trying to talk about it. And third, he's an absolute bully to his co-hosts and producers whenever they even so much as disagree on a bullet point in his overall belief and opinion about these topics. To the point he constantly and without remorse cuts them off, shouts over them, berates them, and infantilizes them, just to name a few things. His meltdown over their disagreement regarding the fucking halftime show was a fucking embarrassment to watch. Knowing this guy is over the age of 12, he constantly makes childish arguments and contradicts himself, as well as spouting mountains of nonsense and categorically untrue statements. His co-hosts put up with this garbage for some fucking odd reason, and it brings down the entire show on a near constant basis. Considering how much of this stuff has been dominating hip-hop news over the past year, they can't get out of it. It also brings down my general opinion of Rory, who seems to lack a spine to stand up to his co-host, who treats him like an abusive father does a fucking literal redheaded stepchild. Mal is the least problematic on his list. He's not morally bankrupt, but he is mentally and unemotionally unequipped to handle these conversations seriously. And he's more of a symptom I see of an overall problem growing in the general population of hip-hop, where if a favorite artist is doing something weird or loses a battle or something like that, they just can't fucking take it, and they can't handle the truth, and they end up crying about it and going and just whining and shouting until someone just stops arguing with them about it instead of just accepting the loss. It's fucking silly. But let's get to the seat-sniffing sycophant himself, Adin Ross. Adin isn't solely a hip-hop commentator or streamer, at least I'm not sure he would officially categorize himself as one of those, but he is undoubtedly hip-hop adjacent at the very least. He's talked about, covered, and created hip-hop content for years now. Being a part of the WL community, he was always going to be somewhat tied to the culture given the general demographic of people who watch and consume WL content. And my problem with Adin Ross is that mainly that he is the textbook definition of a culture vulture, a parasitic leech on the genre. Before we go over some of his many violations, it's worth noting that Adin is a massive streamer on Kick and in the W community whose size is only dwarfed by Kai Cenat himself. Adin is fucking huge, and his audience is incredibly young. He claims the average age of his viewers is 20 to 22 years old, but if you see his chat and never watch his content, it's hard to believe the dude is watched by anyone over the age of 18 without a mental deficiency. Therefore, his audience is highly malleable and impressionable. You see, one of Adin's worst violations, besides the fact that he has the intelligence of Bane from the George Clooney Batman, is his severe lack of respect for the culture as a whole. Don't get me wrong, I don't think you need to be extremely knowledgeable on something in order to be a fan or enjoy it on a general level. What I do think though, is that when your content and engagement involves things as significant as being friends with people like Tory Lanez and Drake, or having 21 Savage and Playboi Carti on your streams, you should at least have general respect for the culture you're inserting yourself into and profiting off of. Or at the very least, you should fucking pretend to have some. The dude doesn't actually give a single solitary fuck about hip-hop outside of his lame attempts at grifting that literally anyone with a modicum of awareness about this topic can comprehend. The dude is the hip-hop equivalent of a facehugger from the Alien movies. He attaches himself to the face of hip-hop, inserts himself into its discussions and media, chokes the ever-loving fuck out of it without remorse, then leaves his proverbial problem children inside the culture for them to grow bigger and burst out of rap's lifeless corpse so they can prove themselves as parasites and become even bigger monsters. It's a vicious fucking cycle. Adin is also just embarrassing to himself, his peers, and the culture. His idea of a funny joke is talking about sucking dick to dudes he knows aren't comfortable with that weird shit, or immediately sniffing the farts out of seats that people like Andrew Tate sit in, if that even is him actually joking. He brings up odd homosexual shit out of nowhere so much that one has to wonder if the dude is actually into women. It seems like thinking of dick that much around other dudes is a definite telltale sign that you like men. And to be absolutely clear, no judgment here against gay people. I have nothing against gay people and want nothing but the best for them and for them to have their freedoms. I just also want Adin to finally be true to himself, you know? Other embarrassing things that he's done though include getting scammed by both 21 Savage and Playboi Carti. The fact he was enough of a dipshit that it happened twice is crazy, but that it happened even worse the second time around is fucking insane to me. Look, getting clipped happens to the best of us, alright? But Playboi Carti took that man for $2 million for 2 minutes of stream time. Not only that, but because Carti wore a literal fucking Halloween mask the entire time, there's been speculation, for good reason, that the person there wasn't even actually Carti himself. I shit you not, Donald Glover couldn't write a more ridiculous script if he tried. Adin is an actual human doormat, which isn't something you see very often at that level of wealth that he's attained. He should trade those fucking millions in for some self-respect. If you know Adin, tell him I got a big box of respect with his name on it for sale, and I'll even make the delivery myself, keeping the mask off for him. All of these things are piss poor looks for someone who represents hip-hop to a degree, especially with the audience that he has, but this last one is some real dangerous buffoonery. You see, Aiden sometimes collaborates with fellow degenerate DJ Akademiks on streams and stuff. Not too long ago, they video called a rapper recently released from Canadian prison and the self-proclaimed Toronto shooter Top 5. Top 5 proclaims not just to be a Toronto shooter, but specifically Drake's shooter, and one of his best friends. Such good friends, in fact, that he accidentally let it slip that Drake helped pay his lawyer fees on the murder case he was facing and in prison for in Toronto. So considering that Top 5 is Drake's dog, Aiden is kind of Drake's dog and a big fan, and Akademiks is Drake's lapdog and #1 fan, they decided to talk about the beef between Drake and Kendrick, the bulk of which wrapped up just a few months earlier. Mind you, this conversation happened during the weekend, if not the very day that Top 5 was released after seemingly narrowly beating a murder charge, so they get on the call and are talking the beef, with Aiden and especially Act egging on Top 5 to say some potentially incriminating and heinous shit, and Top 5 basically says he's waiting to see Kendrick to put a bag over his head. And he also made similar threats to Metro Boomin. This was lapped up like thirsty bitches by Hayden and Ack, who kept steering the conversation into violent alleys while smiling and laughing the entire time. This caused Aiden to get into an online tiff with TDE Smack, a personal favorite hip-hop personality of mine and a California native, as well as friend to Kendrick Lamar and brother to Schoolboy Q. Smack took insane issue with everyone in the stream, in particular Top 5, but also Aiden Ross. Smack said that Aiden was going to get smacked up, no pun intended, and that it was no fly zone for him in Top 5 in LA. Aiden attempted to respond trying to act hard and said that he'll get his fucking security to handle Smack and said LA ain't on shit. And if you know anything about hip hop, that last statement is the very literal definition of asinine. Smack was firm on his statement that Aiden is banned in the city and that there would be problems if he comes to LA. This all led to Ack acting like he never egged shit on and Aiden folding and apologizing while trying to posture as if he wasn't. The last part was my biggest problem with Aiden. He willingly inserted himself into conversations with people whom he knew he had no business tangling with. Aiden is a silver spoon-fed white millionaire streamer with a severe lack of respect for everything having to do with the community he operates in, and a severe lack of respect for himself. He's a troglodyte desperate for attention and self-confidence. He's trash. He's not the worst of the bunch though. We are finally at the worst, possibly the biggest, and certainly the longest reaching in terms of influence. We are finally talking about DJ Akademiks. Look, if you're on this video in the first place, then I'm sure I don't need to explain to you who DJ Akademiks is. He's a scourge on music and hip-hop news / gossip media in general, a raging alcoholic and gratuitous degenerate with a severe case of undeserved narcissism. The self-proclaimed biggest journalist in hip-hop, DJ Akademiks forged a career out of being a professional culture leech and laughingstock, coming to prominence through the glorifying and making light out of the incredibly destructive gang violence that haunts the Chicago drill scene. Akademiks would make comedic news and documentary-style videos mockingly detailing the daily death and danger that those in Chicago's South Side faced. It was apparent then, and it is also apparent now, he never had remorse or saw issue with this type of quote-unquote content that he was producing back then. Whenever asked about it nowadays, he says that he was just commenting on the danger in Chicago with quote-unquote satire. But I'm guessing Ack doesn't know what the word satire means. My guess is based on the fact that not only does Ack look like a toddler, but he has the mental acuity of one as well. His diction is relegated to the words whores, K-bot, and the third-person self-referential Big Ack. Again, this is because the embodiment of being a raging chubby baby goes beyond just his body. Ack also hasn't necessarily stopped in his glorification of street violence that he has not, is not, and will never be a part of. This is evidenced by the way he tried to press the buttons of people like Lil Durk and the stunt he pulled and continues to pull with people like Top 5. He sits in his basement like a fat, vodka Red Bull drinking Nosferatu, sucking the lifeblood out of the culture and its people that have dared to give him so many chances. Instead of showing reverence, he degrades. Instead of paying respect, he belittles. Instead of being a normal guy, he takes sexual advantage of an inebriated woman who trusted him. Instead of being a normal adult, he asks 15-year-old boys if they would like to suck the dick of their favorite content creators. He's a rat with a plague, a locust in a field. He ravages and destroys, will always take, but will never give. DJ Akademiks is a moral cesspit, a lesion stuck on hip-hop slowly rotting away. Even if we were to ignore his fucking insane moral downfalls, which we definitely should not, by the way, he would still be on this list just for his piss-poor so-called coverage of hip-hop. As I said, Ack is the self-proclaimed biggest journalist in hip-hop. You'd think being a journalist that maybe he writes or reports on very factual, thoroughly combed through information and news, right? He doesn't constantly spew gossip and opinion like the hip-hop version of the National Enquirer, right? He doesn't sit there and stream hours a day getting drunk, assaulting women, and giving a dogshit opinion like the rap version of Bill O'Reilly. Right? No, actually he does all of that shit. He postures and posits and constantly gives his trash ass opinion and shit. He doesn't realize nobody gives a fuck about that. And I'm here to tell Act today that people don't watch him because of his journalism. If you want to disgrace the world of journalism to even call it that, nah dog, people watch you Act because you're hip hop's biggest fucking lolcow. People love watching you crash out, kill your liver, and see Drake use you as a fleshlight. You're about to burn out, dog, and ain't no one gonna be able to save your career. Now guys, I know this whole thing seems harsh, but what would you do if you saw someone or something you love getting killed? You'd be as vicious as possible and try to fight off the killer. I love hip hop, and I've been watching as people kill it for years now. It's been a slow death, but it's a death for sure. There are quite a few people out here that are keeping this side of the culture alive though. People who should be up there as the top representation in the game. I'm going to use these last couple minutes just to shout them out, and there will be links to all of these people in the description, so please check them all out if you like to follow hip hop. People like Justin Hunt, the Company Man, Starsky, Curtis King, Fantastic Hip Hop, Screwface John, and Knox Hill, and a shout out especially to Deleted and Read My Soul. Those last two really inspire me to do stuff like this, so I really appreciate that. And all of those people are so fucking passionate and knowledgeable about hip hop, and they all cover it in different ways, but are very thorough and thoughtful with what they do. So definitely go check them all out. It's much needed. And let's get rid of all those other fucking guys, right? Is that cool with y'all? Cool. And I was gonna throw Adam22 into here, but I'm pretty sure everybody, even if they watch Adam22, knows that he's a scumbag and is bad for hip hop. So I just decided to leave him out. I don't know. I don't fucking care. Oh, by the way, what's the dirt? Please quit making videos. You're making the rest of us white rap fans look super goofy. You fucking lame. Alright guys, that's the video. I hope y'all agree. Please like, subscribe, and thank you for watching. Peace out. I'll see y'all next time.